Can Newcastle United win away? Will we buy or build a new stadium? And will Callum Wilson play for Newcastle United again? Let's find out here on Toon Tactics TV.
Brilliant from Shea. And now Murphy could take on the shot. Fabi and Shea
Good evening, folks. How are you all doing? We've got a slightly different scheduled time today. I was hoping to jump on a little bit earlier, hopefully catch you before you go out. Maybe if you do go out today with the family and friends or an evening out, maybe you get a little bit of tactical preview for Newcastle's and Everton's game before you do. Or maybe you're coming back from a long shift. Maybe you're about to clean up the house. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you just want to hear some good football talk. You can join me right here, right now on Toon Tactics TV. So today's show, guys, I'm going to break it down in terms of we're obviously going to do a tactical breakdown for the Newcastle and Everton game, see the strengths and weaknesses of Everton as well as Newcastle United. But before that, we're going to warm the context just a little bit. We're going to talk about everything surrounding Newcastle United going into this game, Eddie Howe's press conference, and as well as other news, a little bit of transfer news and a little bit of new stadium plans and everything else. So, guys, let's strap in, let's sit back and let's enjoy all that we have to come. So, I'm going to kick things off with a general kind of view outside of just before, in terms of everything surrounding Newcastle, all that's been going on in the last couple of days or so before going into Eddie Howe's press conference. So I did bookmark a few things on my Twitter, on my X page, and I wanted to discuss with you guys and get your takes and views. But as always, guys, in the chat, let me know how you guys are doing. Let me know where you are, where you're hailing from, where you're from, where you're listening to, and always let me know your views and your comments and your opinions. So, without further ado, let's talk about a little bit of the news before we get into the tactical breakdown. Obviously, as we discussed, especially in our previous show, there's a lot of talk about the owners in terms of the new stadium plans. So, are we going to build a new stadium? Are we going to extend St. James's Park if we do build a stadium? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be Leazes Park? Is it going to be Turf Moor? It looks like it will be Leazes Park if that's the case. And obviously the questions from journalists, the questions from folks like myself and everybody out there is, St. James's Park, do we stay? Do we go? What do we extend? What do we do? And, they asked Eddie Howe the same question, and he felt that we should stay at St. James's Park. We've got this report, though, from the, which is the latest from the latest fan advisory board meeting, which took place between the supporters and the senior executive. And they took an excerpt here from that meeting where, certainly from NUFC Gallowgate's perspective, the COO, Brad Miller, indicated that definitely Newcastle will, from their perspective, reading between the lines, Brad Miller believes that it is better for Newcastle to move to a new stadium. And they quote, "It's clear extending SJP has several risks. It must provide a return, increase PSR headroom. Part of the process in alternative options, this is once in a generation investment," which I agree with that. "We don't want to look back in years and regret an opportunity." And what do you guys think of that? What do you guys think in terms of, would this be if we essentially stayed at St. James's Park, we didn't build a new stadium, for instance, and I'm not sure what Brad Miller, he's not been definitive about it, but reading between the lines, would it be a missed opportunity for Newcastle to not go out and build a new stadium? In my perspective, I've said it I gave my proposal, which is we can possibly do both: keep St James's Park and build a new stadium where we can keep St James's Park. The women's team can take over, or we can use parts of it as a museum, use parts of it to also be a concert. Like a venue like Tottenham use their stadium, but they use their actual home stadium. They get bantered a lot for it, but at the end of the day, when you look at how healthy their PSR situation is, then it's not so funny, especially from a Newcastle perspective. And so that's my view. I do think it is just as important for any club to hold on to their history and to their culture and all that they've done, but it is also equally important for every club to evolve and to develop. And we know we're about to play Everton, who are actually currently building a new stadium away from Goodison Park. And they're certainly planning for the future. They're certainly trying to become a bigger club. I know that people may not respect Everton right now, but as we do a tactical breakdown on them, we'll see they're actually improving. So they're not just trying to improve on the pitch, but they're trying to improve off it too. And Newcastle and Man United are trying to build the new Wembley of the North. They said that themselves. They're trying to build a new Wembley of the North, and I'll be amazed if the PIF owners don't read that. Being the richest owners in this league, in the sports world, full stop, will look at that and not feel a sense of wanting to compete at least for that title in itself. And that's what, if anything, I think Newcastle should do. So that's my point of view. I think Newcastle should move. But should also keep St James's Park, use it as a way to continue to build this revenue. The women's team can build on the legacy there as well. Hopefully fill our, at the moment, quite empty trophy cabinets. And we build it, and we build at Lees's Park, for instance, not too far from there. I've heard Davey Eddy and others, for instance, mention, I think it was not Turf Moor, I forgot the place they was talking about where you can build the new stadium as well. It won't be just a new stadium, it'll be the training ground, facilities. If you see Man City's one, they've got a huge academy, and the placement that is there. It's time for Newcastle to grow, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think. Are you like, no way, we should stay, this is our history, this is our culture, there's other ways of making money, and it's not always about money? Let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, in other news, because I think it's really big, and there are also rumors to say that people are waiting for the new CEO, whoever that is, to step in after Mr. Ills to be able to announce that. So let's see. In other news, from one of our kind of regular guests here on Toon Tactics TV, Toon Talk, also known as Connor, has reported on his site that Newcastle, and this is him obviously gathering information from other sources, that Newcastle are looking at a new goalkeeper. We know one of those keepers they're looking at is Lucas Chevalier. We've been linked to him over the years as well. I'm not going to go too deep into him, but again, if you guys watched the previous show, you'll know my thoughts on, where Newcastle, and fans will know in general as well, like where Newcastle are looking to improve their transfer business, their transfer activity, their recruitment. I think some real heavy investments going to be in the defense, especially the right centre-back area, but also up front in the right wing area. But also, when we're talking about defensively, we include the goalkeeping department in that, and that in itself is going to signify a real shift and development in Newcastle's squad, in Newcastle's development as a team. So Lucas Chevalier, I have bookmarked him. So I did obviously a show on kind of Newcastle profiles and stuff like that. I kind of covered the whole team, but I because of time, I don't think I didn't do every player or as many players as possible justice and given their time. So I'm planning to do some shows in the future where I specifically focus on the defense. I specifically focus on the midfield. I specifically focus on the forward line. Kind of the players that have been linked to Newcastle's in those areas where I think I'll get kind of information on those players, How likely are they to come? And what impact could they have on Newcastle United's team? So I'm going to do that. And I'll include Mr. Chevalier in that discussion as well. Again, Mark Douglas, who you know we've spoken about previously. Mark Douglas obviously had that hour and a half long interview with Mr. Mitchell, and he's been very busy this week, Mark Douglas, in terms of the article. I think it's wrote about 3, 4, 5 maybe articles this week in relation to Newcastle United. A lot about our building, about our structure, and everything that's going on. And in this article, it talks about psychologists being recruited to help in our loans and recruitment department to try and get another Minte situation. It's interesting that maybe is an indicator, because Minte is not only a standout in terms of how he did in terms of on loan, but he's almost like an outlier. We've had so many players that haven't done so well, and I know it's tough. Obviously, Harrison Ashby's injured. When he was at Swansea, wasn't doing very well there. Garang Kouwao is completely off the boil, totally off the boil from what about him. So Newcastle are trying to find ways to be able to be more supportive for their young players. So they want to, and we talked about this. Interesting funds for more Osolas, but there has to be a balance. And what that means, obviously, we know, obviously, William Osola, he's our 21, 22-year-old striker who is pretty much third in line behind Isak and Wilson, and is a player that we're looking to develop. And when we talk about when Mark Douglas is referring to more Osolas, he's talking about more youth players to bring into the ranks of Newcastle, either to succeed and have an impact on the squad, or possibly be sold on. And we talked about in our previous show, when we're talking about from Mark Douglas, we examined his article on Newcastle's about 9-10 contracts that are run out in 2025, how Newcastle would generally approach the transfer window, the spinning plates of where are those players going to be in 2 years' time, what's their current impact, buying players from abroad, buying players from at home, integrating them, and in order to always ensure to recruit in a way that helps evolve and grow the team rather than detract the team. So we essentially talked about bringing in youth players or bringing in players to buy to sell, and how I said in that show is, I'm wondering if, and in my own personal belief is that Paul Mitchell will have a separate fund from our actual transfer fund where we buy players directly for the first team itself, but would have a separate fund for maybe to buy to sell players, or as well your youth or your Osola types. And it looks like from Mark Douglas, it is from Mark Douglas's report, that indeed there will be funds for more Osolas. There will be funds for Paul Mitchell to himself almost exclusively to buy players of that ilk, and how untapped talent, as Mark Douglas says, plan already on the way. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I'm very, people were wondering what is going to happen in the January transfer window. What kind of players what kind of movements, if at all, will Newcastle make? And like I said, in my opinion, in my view, I think, and we would have seen some news on Mark Gahey, but I think if there's going to be any kind of real kind of high frequency in incomings for Newcastle, it will be players, those youth development type of players, untapped potential. And speaking of untapped potential, Joshua Acheampong, who has recently come up on our show, again, as a result of Mark Douglas, Mr. Antonio Mango, fantastic analyst, provides us with this scouting report of Josh Acheampong, which is, he sent us a clip here on his X website, which I want to share with you, which gives us a little bit more insight into into Mr. Acheampong in the kind of player profile he has here. So let me see if I can tap into it and see if I can, because it's about a 40 second clip. And I think what he says about Joshua also adds to what the type of defender, the type of player that Newcastle are looking for, and how they're looking to evolve as a team. So let me see. Yep, you guys can see it on the screen there. Let me play what Mr. Mango says here.
Chelsea. He looks equally as comfortable in both.
I hear it. Let me see.
Positions. Now,
okay, let me see. Can you guys?
The first thing I want to mention is he's got a
brilliant head on his
shoulders. He's always showing great attitude.
All right, guys, let me know if you can hear it. I'll take my. Just say if you can hear it. Let me see. I'm going to play it a little bit here.
He looks equally as comfortable in both positions. Now, the first thing I want to mention is...
So when it talks about is equally as comfortable in both positions, Joshua Acheampong plays right centre-back primarily, but he can also play right back. But as you saw from the heat map, he looks very, very comfortable playing at right back too. And when we talked about being able to be flexible, every team can only invest so much. And so when you have a player or players that can play in more than one position at a very high level, they are like gold dust.
He's showing great attitude. He has a presence on the football pitch, and he likes to overwhelm opponents because he's extremely athletic. He stands at 6 foot. Presser. He's extremely aggressive and constantly getting in the opponent's face, using aggression, determination to win back possession. Now,
so he's a highly aggressive player, 6'1", 18 years old, but really, really, really kind of pushing forward, likes to push forward, likes to get into the midfield, is the type of player that we are looking for, that we are trying to invest in to the future for. So before I go into some other news, and then we'll go into the house press conference before going into the tactical review, get a few of the comments in. Welcome to all those that have come. Rich, even an all tough game, but hoping for another game. Home win. Are you an Everton fan? Great to have you on, sir. Are you an Everton fan? I can't see from here. My vision isn't the greatest, but if you are, Rich, let me know. You are very, very welcome. I'll be very keen to hear your opinion, as because we're going to give a real good, give my best in terms of trying to break down Everton tactically and all that they're doing. So I'll be really keen to know what your thoughts are. Connor, is that you? Is that Toon Talks? Great to have you, sir. You're obsessed with him now. I am. He's on my mind. He is on my mind, and I think you're going to be hearing a lot more of him, Connor. So, no, thank you. Great to see you, sir. Great to see you. We actually read an early report from you, Connor. You missed it on Chevalier. I can't even pronounce his name very well. Obviously, from your site in terms of Newcastle be linked to them as well. So that is interesting. So let me get on to other news. Here we go. Just a little bit of other news. There was, that's Mr. Mango again. Incredible analyst. Right. So, Odysseus, our second most expensive goalkeeper. Now, we talked about, and this is very interesting. This is from transfermarket.com. You guys will remember from the previous show, our previous show, when we talked about where Newcastle are in terms of how they compare to other. We talked a little bit about how they compare to other teams. Obviously, how Paul Mitchell, Eddie Howe, and Piff are looking to grow, are looking to invest into the team. And I remember there was a debate about have Newcastle improved. And I was saying, for me personally, have Newcastle improved as a squad, as a team since the takeover? And in my view, they have, because Newcastle have gone from a relegation fighting team, regularly fighting, literally bottom 4, bottom 3 fighting team, to go in Champions League and obviously finishing in the top half of the league since the takeover has happened. But also, you can see that reflected in this. This is transferwindow.com showing a table of the most valuable clubs in the Premier League, where Newcastle, and we also, you guys remember, we used indicators. We kind of use value of as an indicator of player, of how, maybe as just one indicator of how good a squad, how good a squad is. And Newcastle comes 7th in the league, in the English Premier League, for the most valuable squads. Interestingly, we're currently 7th in the Premier League itself, and we are roughly 40 million euros ahead of Aston Villa. I wonder how that is. Maybe I need to do a show comparing our squads in terms of quality as well. So about 40 million ahead of Aston Villa, which is interesting. And we're roughly 120, 130 million behind Tottenham. Tottenham, who we've been regularly beating the last couple of years, which is another interesting thing as well. Man United, obviously, they're nearly a billion, but we know how Man United are doing at the moment as well. So value isn't always the greatest indicator, but you can tell, for instance, Man United maybe had a different coach. Possibly they'll be living up to their value. But it's also interesting to see, where Newcastle are at in terms of value at the moment. And I know this is transferwindow.com's value, but it's a very interesting place where Newcastle are at in terms of value of squad. 40 million ahead of Aston Villa, our closest rivals, and about 120 million away from Tottenham. Now, to make up that gap, not just in value but in quality, it doesn't necessarily mean that Newcastle have to spend 120 million or 200 million, for instance, to get ahead of Tottenham. But it's going to be around, what Paul Mitchell, I think, is proposing in terms of finding untapped talent, growing that talent, that youth development as well, and in order to kind of break that ceiling. But I thought it was really interesting. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that. Do you think this is accurate? Do you think this is accurate valuation of where Newcastle are at in terms of, value of squad, but also maybe in quality? You guys, are Tottenham in overall quality as a squad, as a team, better than Newcastle? Man United, do they have overall better quality? In my view, if you ask me today, without looking, and I have been looking at Tottenham squad regularly, I think we're about neck and neck with Tottenham in terms of quality. Is where our centre backs kind of let us down, where they've got Van de Ven and Romero, but our front line, and I think at least two of our midfielders get into theirs, into a 3-man midfield. So it's very, very close. And I just think we're better than Man United. I do think our front three are better than Man United. Our midfield is better than Man United. None of our centre backs would make it into Man United, but I think Lewis Hall and Livramento are developing at the moment, but definitely Pope is better than Onana. So, that's my view. So Newcastle, if we were to use that as an indicator, Newcastle could finish anywhere between 7th and 5th this season. But I'll be keen to know what you guys think. And obviously, we talked about the stadium itself and all the information around that, which is, do we build a new stadium or not? And obviously, we had an Everton fan here. I don't know, Rich, if you're here, but I'll be interested to know from Everton's perspective, how do you feel about, as a fan, moving away from Goodison Park? So that's some of the news surrounding Newcastle United going into this game. We talked about the value of our squad. We're 7th in the league. I think we could be anywhere between 7th and 5th in terms of quality. We talked about possible transfer news and transfer people coming in, and Joshua Acheampong, Acheampong, the right centre back, can play right back, Chevalier, the goalkeeper. We talked about, obviously, stadium plans. Do we stay? Do we go? And, the recent fans and advisory board meeting and everything else around that. So there's a lot of information, a lot of news going on around that. So Going into the conference, I'm going to I'm going to talk about one specific point in and around this comment. There was a couple of things that Howe did talk about. It talked about Callum Wilson. He talked about, obviously, there was a question on Callum Wilson around, essentially, is there any point in keeping him? He's never available. And Howe defended Callum Wilson and really believes that Wilson is still of great value to the Newcastle team, and is himself keen to continue to prove that, is keen to continue to show that. And so, Howe gave quite a staunch defense of Callum Wilson, and Callum Wilson will have his opportunity to prove that in the season coming up. There was obviously questions around how he felt about Newcastle possibly moving to a new stadium. Mr. Howe would like to move. No, it's not move. Excuse me. He doesn't want to move. Howe wants to stay at St. James's Park. I disagree with Howe. I disagree with Howe on that. I think Newcastle should move. And the other question they were asking Eddie Howe was around Newcastle's away form, and essentially the Newcastle being consistently inconsistent in their away form, and they were doing it very well, in my opinion, trying to knuckle down, trying to find the reason why Newcastle was simply not doing well. Can you guys see that? Oh, that's too much, isn't it? Why Newcastle was simply not showing the same form away as they were doing at home. And really what it boiled down to, and let's get down to this question directly that is asked to Eddie Howe and what he says about it. I might have to show it in a different way because, interestingly enough, actually, let me see. Is it gonna come? Let me have to go on. And it was because the questions around Newcastle's away form were asked about 4 or 5 different times by the reporters in different ways, and it wasn't a bad thing because they were kind of coming at it in different angles. And credit to Howe, he was answering the questions directly. I'll ask you guys while I'm searching for this. What's you guys? I think if we're playing at New Everton at home, we have a slightly different confidence level. Because we know, especially like when we played Man City, I had a different confidence level at home because I knew what Newcastle could do, and we all feel it when we're at home. How Newcastle play, and there is a difference in that. And they talked about it with Howe. They talked about it. What does he think the different reasons are for that? So let me bring this up. It was a very well worded question from the journalist. I don't know who the name of the journalist, so apologies, I can't name them. But let me bring this up. I liked the question. We've got some comments here. Screen sharing as cancelled. Yeah, I'll bring that up. Don't worry. So, Connor, we have shown if our team gels like a Man City. We have shown if our team gels like at Man City, we can compete with the very best. I agree. And if we play this way against Everton, then I have no doubt we will win 3-1. You know what, Connor? Without giving away too much, this is exactly my thoughts, and in terms of how Newcastle could potentially perform. So let me bring up what Mr. Howe says. Let me bring this up because I finally got it on. Here we go. Let me bring this up. All right, let me make sure you guys can see it. Can you guys see it? Yes, you can. So the question is around. Let me get myself, because I think the light is going. I'll be back, folks. All right. Hope you're still here. So the question is around Newcastle's away form.
So you want to build on that with your next Premier League game, but it is harder away from home when you haven't got that crowd. So how do you adapt to the challenge?
So it's a very interesting question. The question, oops, sorry there. And I love the way this lady worded it. It goes, you know, you played so well against Man City, and you know, we all kind of attribute a lot of that down to the crowd, that it energizes you. How do you adapt when you don't have the crowd and you're playing away from home? And Eddie Howe doesn't deny that. He actually acknowledges that himself in this.
You're absolutely right. It is harder because the energy that the crowd give us, the feeling, sometimes you're sort of a player will be questioning whether he goes, whether he doesn't.
That's so interesting. Howe acknowledges, and it's true, that the crowd, the St. James's crowd, and in maybe in football in general as well, is that it gives that player that confidence, that belief that, you know, when he's talking about, you know, there's split-second decisions made all the time, all over the pitch, especially in high-level games. You know, that if you're away from home, you're doubting yourself just that little bit more, and that's what could lose you the ball. But when you're at home, you don't have that, and it's going to be interesting because we're playing away at Goodison, and the Everton players are going to have the crowd on their side,
because every decision you make on a football pitch, you have to try and get right. Sometimes it's taken away by the roar of the crowd, and they'll go. And that instinct served us so well at home. Away from home, of course, the support's in the main with the other team. So that's something we're well aware of. And I think tactically, it's just about our delivery. It's about our delivery of how we implement our style in every game, and it's very different. Every game, every challenge is different. Every team we play against is different. I think we've seen us be effective, even if we're not pressing. Pressing isn't the be all and end all. Sometimes.
So he's kind of going into it's about our delivery. It's about how we kind of approach the game from a tactical point of view.
There's a time when you have to play a different way, but it's just being effective in whatever you do.
It's being effective in whatever you do. So there's a lot of things that he's talking about that, and they kind of do go into that. But the main question from the press conferences was for how are you going to do away from home without your crowd? And Eddie Howe was very, very upfront about that and said, yes, we play well better with a crowd at home, and so we're going to have to be consistent. And they were asking him about how will you be consistent, and look, he essentially said, look, when you see the top teams play, they play this. If you didn't know what they're playing away or they're playing at home, they play exactly the same, and that's the level. That's what we're trying to achieve. And he said, look, my job is to create there's partly my responsibility where I have to create an environment for players to grow and to train well and to develop. I think I'm doing that. The other part is on the players. They have to deliver on the pitch. So he hasn't necessarily thrown anybody on the bus. He's actually given a very honest assessment, in my view, that look, some of it does come down to the players themselves. And when we're talking about, there's very reasons why players deliver or they don't deliver on the pitch. We talked about it before and he's mentioned it, if someone's got a year left on their contract, that could affect their performance, maybe personal issues, maybe they're on social media, maybe they woke up on the wrong side of the bed that night. All of these come to light when you're playing. Everton are going to have the crowd on their side. However, the flip side of that is if Newcastle play well, if they can silence the crowd, or if they can outperform Everton and make Everton look bad and get the crowd on Everton's back, and we know that can happen, we've seen Everton fans, then that kind of dynamic of it being a home game shifts, and it's the home team who are now under pressure from their own fans. And I think that's way worse than being under pressure by the away fans, because obviously the away fans are supposed to be there to put you under pressure in the first place. So it's when it's your own when it's your own team, when it's your own it's when it's your own fans, it's a lot worse. It's a lot worse. So we've done the press conference. We've done the news around Newcastle. Let's get down to the tactical breakdown of the game itself. I'm just going to read a comment before we go into that, because it's very interesting kind of seeing how Everton, in my view, have developed as a team of recent. So, Connor, please like and subscribe, guys. Phillips works very hard to bring in-depth content every stream. I really appreciate you for that, Connor. And yeah, guys, please do like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. As always, very, very interested to hear what you guys are thinking about in terms of any content that we're sharing. Yeah, just I hope you guys are enjoying the show. So, tactical breakdown. I'm going to give an overview of Everton as well, and then I'm going to go into a lot of the strength that they've got. And I think, in my view, and next maybe I should start bringing on a little bit more fans on it, but kind of rival fans on, because in my view, looking at Everton, they have developed as a team. I don't know how different they are compared to last season, because I've only watched them obviously against Newcastle, but in my view, they've developed as a team, and they have various strengths about them. But if you look at some of the overall stats, they don't look incredible, but neither do Newcastle. So I have to just say that. So this is from FOTMO. The current overall rating on FOTMO, for instance, they're 17th, which is very, very low. They're quite, goals per match 1.2, which isn't bad. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the strengths in particular. They do create enough to kind of, they can hurt you, and we're talking a lot about how they create those chances, because the attacking front, they have, in my view, they have really progressed how they're doing, and that's the part that Newcastle have to really, really, really address. But then at the same time, with their goals per match, they've conceded a lot of goals. 2.5 is massive, and we're going to touch on that, because part of the reason why I think they're conceding so much is because part of how they're attacking. In my view, possession is always going to be low. Well, I say always is going to be low, but they're not a possession-based team as things currently stand. The other things I wanted to talk about was their interceptions per match. They're second in the league for that. Now, that interceptions can mean various different things. Newcastle's interceptions are very, very low. They're like one of the lowest in the league. Interceptions being essentially cutting off passes. In the very bare, simple form, a team's ability. This is a metric that measures a team's ability to cut off passes. Now, when you look at this league table, the teams that are at the very top of it, Man United are there, but it's Everton, Brentford, Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, West Ham. These aren't really, apart from Bournemouth-ish, they're not really possession-based teams. Very interestingly, they're teams that spend a lot of time without the ball. And so what that could indicate is, of course, their interceptions are very high because they don't spend a lot of time with the ball, which is what Everton do. So they spend a lot of time trying to get the ball, cutting off passes, making sure they're in positions to cut off passes and to attack teams. Newcastle on the other end of the table with Man Cities and Arsenals and Liverpools. However, I'm going to caveat that Newcastle haven't, apart from the Man City game this season, they haven't been performing like a Man City, Arsenal, or a Liverpool. And in fact, our possession stats are very close to Everton's. And what that indicates to me, and Connor talked about, if we play against Everton like we could play against Man City, Newcastle have had a mixed season. I think part of the reason why their interceptions are so low is because our intensity up to the point of Man City and parts of Wolves' game, in my view, our intensity has been very, very low. We're not a high possession side at this moment of time, but we're building towards that. So Everton's reasons for interceptions are low because they're by design. a team that is low in possession, whereas ours has been very low because by just not performing as well as we could, we have not been as high in our duels, in our tackles, as well as our interceptions. And obviously, the Man City game changed that. And speaking of that, we're going to get onto it. Another good thing that I think Everton have shown is possession won in the final third, and that's going to be another strength that we're going to talk about at Everton. Possession won in the final third. They're in the top half of the table for that. Newcastle are in the lower half of the table for that. Again, indicating to me, Everton's have a good coordinated press, and also have an intensity and a confidence about their play, about what they're doing. So there's lots to like about Everton. There's lots that we can bash them about, which is obviously the level, which are very clear. They're very low possession stat team. The amount of goals they've conceded, how they've conceded those goals as well, is very, very, very low. And so, but there are, but I'm gonna analyze Everton at their best, and there is a lot to say, a lot of positive to say about Everton. If you match them up with Newcastle and some of those stats as well, we'll see just a little bit. For instance, we've only scored one more in the last 6 games. Obviously, in the games in the Premier League, we've only scored one more goal than them. They've conceded 15 goals. We've conceded 7. And that's going to be a key metric coming into this game, in my opinion. We've only, with goals per game, 1.3 for us, 1.2 for them. So again, like it's, it's very, very close for us. We do shoot more, we do get more shots on target, we've got better strikers, we do create more chances per game, but only just, Everton are still up there, and we're going to talk about how they create those chances as well. Our ball possession is about 8% higher, which is quite significant, but still low when you talk about it in other terms. So there's lots of interesting. We've only got one. We've got one clean sheet this year, when they've got 0. So it kind of we've already got a taster, a little caveat for where this game could go. We've had to make more saves per game than them, almost twice more saves per game than them. So it shows you just how mixed in performances Newcastle have been, where we can have more possession, we can score more goals, we can keep more clean sheets, we've got more, we concede less goals, we concede nearly twice less, less than 2 times less goals than Everton. But our goalkeeper, Mr. Pope, has to make nearly twice more saves. So you can just see how mixed Newcastle's performances have been this season. So I'm going to highlight some things about Everton that I really like, and how I think Newcastle need to, if they're going to get anything from this game at Goodison Park, how they need to respond and what they need to do. Big up to you, Chaos Monster. We're going to go to the comments before I do that. Big up to you, Chaos Monster. Thank you for joining. I don't think I've seen you here before, but great to have you, sir. Hello, Philip from Chaos. I support again, Chaos Monster. I support Newcastle United. We only scored 1 goal versus Wimbledon. We need to be more effective versus Everton. I agree with you. I do agree with you. Though I would only say for the Wimbledon game, we made several changes from that game. We were always in control over that game. Osola was our striker, for instance. And so, yes, there's an expectation that we would really, I predicted 4-0. I predicted 4-0 for that game. We won 1-0. So, I had the same expectations as you, Chaos. But, looking at the game and everything that happened, the amount of changes and everything else like that, it was a fairly easy game for us, though the scoreline didn't reflect that. So I do agree with you to an extent. But I think there's circumstances for why we had the low score. Connor, Everton are a very direct team and take low risks in passing. I agree with you. Get the ball forward quickly and through the middle. Yes, sir. I agree with you as well. The good thing is they don't play with a number 10, which we They don't play with a number 10, which we struggle with. Well, you let me know, Connor, because I think McNeil, and I'm going to talk about this now, going into the tactics themselves. Let me make sure that you guys can. Oh no, good. I checked. So let's go onto the tactics board itself. I'm going to talk, and I've got highlights next to this as well. I'm going to show you highlights of this. So you guys can see that I'm not just talking. And let me zoom in a little bit. Let me see what you guys can see. I'm going to talk about 3 different areas of play that I see Everton being dangerous in, but I also use those particular situations to highlight how Newcastle can also be dangerous themselves. Can you guys see that? Yes. So this is the part where, and this is going back to exactly what Connor was saying, how direct Everton like to be in their play. So one of the ways they're going to do that is they're not going to be messing around trying to do intricate plays through the middle of it's not Man City. They're not going to be trying to have a pattern of play that gets them through the middle, going left or right, anything like that. It's going to be fairly direct, but it's, they got the highest long ball accuracy in the league. So it's not a hoof ball. People might say it's not grenade launchable where you just hit the ball and hope. It's a very, very coordinated way of doing it, and we're going to show that in the highlight. I think it's against either Palace or Bournemouth. I'm going to show, but I'm going to first show it on this tactic board. An example of this is, for instance, Branthwaite being on the ball, and you can see that. So we know that Isak's not going to be playing. So this is what I've got. This is Everton going from left to right. And what you guys can see, especially in the final third of the pitch on our end, you can see McNeil, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and in this case it's Jasper Lindstrom, who Newcastle have been sort of linked with before ages ago. It'd either be Jasper Lindstrom or Jack Harrison. And you would have seen from this is I've taken these average positions from Everton's against Bournemouth. I forgot the other team. And against Palace, their last game against Palace. And what's impressive is that Dwight McNeil and Jasper Lindstrom, or it will be Jack Harrison, stay very, very close to around Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So when the ball is sent to Dominic's way, whether he, is able to head it down, chest it, even if it bounces off the defender, there is always the threat of a McNeil or Jasper Lindstrom picking it up with the likes of Decore, who's really, 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 really good at breaking forth from the midfield and gathering up the play. And once this happens, if Dominic gets a hold of the ball, you'll see McNeil burst through. You see Jasper or Jack Harrison bursting through, and you see Mr. Decore coming in on that. And if Newcastle are not alive and alert, if that first ball isn't one, of which I think Dan Burn would be up against Dominic Calvert-Lewin, if Newcastle don't get that first ball, which is the most important ball, they're really in danger. And they have to be ready to react to that second ball, which inevitably is going directly towards goal, either to Dominic or to Jasper. And let's see how this works in terms of the game itself. Now, this game, let me make sure you guys can see this on the screen. This is the game they play against Bournemouth. Now, I know they lost this game eventually, but Everton did really, really well. Can you guys see this? Yes, you can. I want to point you to, so you can see I don't know if you guys can see, my mouse is moving. It's around, I don't know who kicks this ball. I don't know if it's Branthwaite, but he's about to launch it into that direction, totally bypass the midfield. And I want you to notice something about how many players, those same players, are up front and why it's such a danger. Oh God, goodness, that was close. Let me turn off the sound. So the ball's about to go. And you guys can see it. There's a number of midfielders there. I don't know if that's Idris Gay. He's on his way. He's on his bike. He's ready to pick up that second ball available to him. It bypasses the Bournemouth midfield, so there's no point in pressing. It goes directly, I think it's to Idris himself. He picks it up. Behind him is, I think, in J. His name is in J. He's ready for the follow up. Bournemouth have to respond to this as quickly as possible. But Everton are doing. Idris ball, poor defending there from Bournemouth. And you can already see one Everton player, two Everton player, and that's Dwight McNeil. And I know, Connor, you mentioned about not having a number 10. Dwight McNeil here is in the number 10 position, and he's very, very good. I think he's got 1 or 2 assists this season and a couple of goals. I know he's got a won the goal as well. But already you can see the ball is won. It's gone over the top, and you've got 3 Everton players. So this is Bournemouth's half, by the way, surrounding the ball. Bournemouth are in trouble. He just picks up the ball. The player is down. Now you've got more players joining already. It just goes past that same player. Bournemouth do not stop him. This is the mistake. And if you're not playing well, if you're not playing intense, if you're not on it, if you're not winning your ground duels, guys, remember those ground duels are so important. You put yourself in imminent danger, and you can already see Mr. Dwight McNeil is saying, "Give me the ball." The Bournemouth defender, I don't know if it's who's next to him. I don't know if that's Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I can't see from here. The defender doesn't know whether to come towards Idris, because if he does that, the ball goes Dominic Calvert-Lewin. This defender number 5 here has to, or the number 10 behind him, they're too slow in closing down closing down McNeil. And it's danger. McNeil then says, okay, you're going to push on. It's clever work from McNeil. He doesn't just stay there and say, give me the ball. He gets on his bike. And he puts this defender in a situation where now, okay, Idris is coming towards me. McNeil's on his bike. I think it's Dominic Calvert-Lewin's on his bike. They are all over the shop. Who do they close down? They finally make the move, but it's too late. Now they make the tackle, but there's a follow-up. The same defender, I think it's in J, who followed him. This is the 4th player. Follows up. He gets in. Bournemouth again failed to clear it. This is poor defending. I talk about Bournemouth being poor defending, but if Newcastle aren't on it, and Eddie Howe will be telling them this, Connor, for instance, Connor Toon talks about if the Newcastle that is a Man City that played against Man City turns up, we deal with this ball at least 3 moves ago. If the Newcastle that played Fulham turns up, you're going to see this type of defending. So that's the problem. Now the ball rolls out to Dwight McNeil. Look at this. There's 1, 2, 3 Everton. Have you ever heard of that? 3 Everton players about to run into the Bournemouth box. 3 Everton defenders. Dwight McNeil in the number 10 role makes the perfect pass to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I don't think he even has to take a touch. Who's excellent finish. This is where, when we talked about how dangerous Everton can be in that sort of position, and kind of points to why they've scored so many goals This is 1 point. The ball over the top, over the midfield. It isn't dealt with. It gets to Dwight McNeil, who's in that dangerous spot. And Everton are very good at committing men forward. Before I move to the next point, we've got Connor. Dominic, DCL won't win many headers against Burn, and that is what I hope. Burn has to be on it. Connor, take care. Philip, got to go. Have a good one, sir. Connor, God bless and take care of yourself. Good to see you as always. So, Burn has to take care of that first ball, and not just Burn if it's Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but the other players have to too as well. I think Everton, if they're smart, they'll keep the ball away from Burn and get Dominic Calvert-Lewin to press against Shaw, to press against Kieran Trippier, to press up against any Newcastle player apart from Joe Linton and Dan Burn. And so that's one form of attack that Newcastle have to deal with. And remember, Everton commit lots of players forward in those attacks, which in my view is part of the reason why they concede. And we're going to talk about that. So This is yes, here we go. I want to make sure you guys can see that on this is now the second situation for Newcastle United. So again, Everton are moving from left to right. And where is the ball? So in this instant, Lewis Hall has the ball. And I think if you're Everton, if you're Sean Dyche, you're watching the Fulham game, and Fulham adopted a mid-block against Newcastle, where essentially they had 3-4 players pressing up against the Newcastle defenders, but blocking their passing channels to your Tonali's, to your Bruno Gomes and others. And what essentially happened was they tried to keep the ball between Burn and Shaw, which they did really, really well, and cause us to try and launch the ball. We just weren't making enough to launch the ball where they want it, or we were hitting it side to side a lot to Harvey Barnes, for instance, and we didn't have Kieran Trippier at the time to Livramento. I can't remember who played on the right back to Livramento, and Fulham just kept on winning it back, turning it over. And because our intensity was so poor in that game, our ground was low, our pressing was low, it was generally very, very flat. We was always up against it. Fulham really broke us down. And if you're Sean Dyche, and one of the issues that created was when they forced us into having the ball. It wasn't that we necessarily wanted to, it was by design. They forced us to have the ball in these areas like that, where they separated our defense from our midfield. The midfield constantly had to have their back towards the opposition goal, and they had to face our goal. And what that causes another separation, a huge gap between our midfield and our forward line. And so we lacked attacking threat whatsoever. And so Everton, you would have seen, guys, again, they're 7th in the league for winning the ball. For winning the ball in the final third. So Everton's press is very, very very, very impressive. And I'm going to show you this example here against Palace. They did it against Palace, and I'm going to show you as well how they did it as well against Aston Villa. So let me make sure you guys can see it. Yes, here we go. You can see it there. This is them. This is now Palace. Now here, Palace have got the ball. Yes, Palace have got the ball. And look how many players are in their half. And what I'm trying to say is, another thing I want to point out is, this Everton team has situations where they're very high pressing. Remember, 7th in the league. Look how many players are in Everton's half, final third. Of Everton players are in final third at the moment. 1, 2, 3. Those are the ones near their box. Then another 4, 5. Then another 6, 7. Then another just outshot 8. There's 8 Everton players in Crystal Palace half, with the sole objective of keeping Palace in their half. Newcastle can expect this, and they have to be ready. So here's Everton. They on the ball. I think it's Kamada that's got the ball. Kamada now passes the ball here to Eze, their number 10. And look how Eze has to drop in now to be able to collect the ball. We prefer Eze to be on the other side of the pitch and to cause damage. But it already shows you that Everton's press has so disjointed Crystal Palace that their forwards now have to get into their own half to be able to get the ball, making their threats towards goal even less reduced now. And again, if Newcastle are not careful, you're going to find Bruno Gomes, you're going to find Harvey Barnes dropping in, Gordon dropping in, all those things, because the press is so good from Everton. So Eze's about to get the ball, but the ball is not good enough. And look what happens here. Ashley Young is about to intercept. We talked about interceptions earlier, and I'm going to also highlight Ashley Young a little bit later because he's so important to the way Everton play. When Everton play, and you look at the touch stats, so the amount of times individual players have a touch of the ball in the game, is Ashley Young, who's either first or second for Everton. You know, I'm not, how old is Ashley Young now? Somebody tell me. He's about to make the interception. Eze is not quick enough to it. He's not ready to receive it. He's not being intensive. And look what happens. The moment Ashley Young gathers the ball, you've got, like I said, you've got 5 Everton players in front of him, and you've got 3 Everton players directly behind him. So even if you were to lose the ball, Everton are ready to counter press and win it back. They're launching forward. Jack Harrison's about to make a run to the right. Calvert-Lewin's about to get into the box. Ashley Young stalls a little bit. He gets it to who? Mr. Dwight McNeil, the number 7, playing in the number 10 role. There is no one around him. Look how much space and time he has. Look how much space and time he has to set himself. I don't know how many yards Eze is behind him. I don't know how many yards the defense is behind him, but they're almost saying, go on, have a go. Let's see what you can do. And look at this. Now, I know this is a wonder goal. I understand that this is a wonder goal. But whether Dwight McNeil shoots or doesn't shoot, he has all the time and space to shoot, to pass, to do whatever he wants. And Palace are in no way in a position to offer any threat going in the other direction. And so when Newcastle are playing away from home against Goodison at Goodison Park, they have to be ready. They have to close down the spaces. They have to be compact. They have to be able to win the first ball. If they don't win the first ball, that second ball must be won, because Everton are ready. They're ready to press. They're ready to counter press. So they're ready to win the ball back should they lose it. And Newcastle have to be ready for that. So before I get to the Aston Villa scene, because Aston Villa make the same mistake. They don't think Everton are as good as pressing as we know them to be. But before I get that, let me read the comments. Adieri, good to see you again, sir. Hope you are well. Adieri Concuma, hi Philip, how are you? Amanda Staveley should invest her money not in Spurs. Amanda Staveley should invest her money in Newcastle United. Adieri, you know, you and I know she's not coming back. If she could invest in Spurs, she will. Even if she could invest in Newcastle, from everything that you hear, here's my advice. Look up Tyneside Life. He does a really good breakdown of why Staveley and Murdoch left Newcastle. You know, and if you watch that, you will see why, in my view, I find it very unlikely that Amanda Staveley comes back. But Adeyemi, it's always good to hear from you. So, guys, you see Everton, who are 7th in the table for winning the ball in the final third. Newcastle are bottom half, by the way. Everton, who are 7th in the league for winning the ball in the final third. You just seen what they did against Crystal Palace. Now let's see what they did. Now let's see what they do against Villa. Now again, Villa have the ball, and this is at Villa. This is at their ground. This isn't just Everton turn it on when they're at home. They're pressing and they're counter pressing teams when they're away from home. Now Konsa's about to receive the ball. Villa are playing from right to left. Obviously, Everton are in the white kit this time. They're all playing away from home. Konsa's about to receive the ball. He has, Calvert-Lewin is already trying to win the ball back. You see Dominic McNeil here about to make his way towards him, and the midfielder is still a little bit away from him, but he thinks he's got all the time in the world. He receives the ball. He overestimates how much time he has. McNeil is already on him. He's already on him. And look at Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has blocked off the pass back to, I don't know if it's Diego Carlos there. McNeil does a run where he blocks the run. He blocks a possible pass to Tielemans here in the 8th. Idris Gueye blocks off the pass to Rodgers. And Jay is ready to receive to block off the pass. I don't know who's on the right there for Villa. And I don't know who the player is in the middle. If it's Malenga, he's blocking off the pass to their midfield as well. So now Mr. Konsa is in a whole heap of trouble already. Everton have pressed him. McNeil has pressed him. He's won the ball back really, really well. Calvert-Lewin is on his bike. Look at this again. Look at this again, what we talked about in terms of how many players are in Villa's half. There's Everton players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Everton players in Villa's half. There was 8 players in Crystal Palace's half. They press. Again, McNeil. We know what McNeil can do. He can either shoot or he can pass. And in this case, he chooses to take on his man and shoot. And he scores a wonderful goal. And you can see already, I don't know what his stats are this season, but he's right up there in terms of goals. He's right up there in their assists. You know, if anybody thinks that this is going to be defense versus attack, it's going to be Everton 10 men behind the ball, that's not what's going to happen in this game. I fully anticipate Everton to have times when they really, really, really press against Newcastle, or I think a majority of the times, as you saw here against Villa, as you saw against Palace, Everton will take up a mid-block position and look to take the ball off, to press, get the ball of Newcastle United and hit them on that counter press, hit them on the counter attack as well. So there's really, really key parts to Everton's game, to what they're really, really good at. And I haven't mentioned the set pieces either, which they have been scoring. They've been very, very, very good in those situations. So Newcastle have to be on the ball. They have to be on the ball in terms of what they're doing. If they're sleeping, if they're not ready, if they play like they played against Fulham, you're going to see a Fulham result. If they play against Man City, so let's go back to this situation. This is the part where, again, I think this is going to be the majority of what Everton's game plan is going to be. Remember, they're not a possession-based side. This is their key. Direct balls, either directly to their attackers, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, McNeil surrounding Dominic Calvert-Lewin, being surrounded by Decore, Jasper, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and others, and hitting on left. Or the main one here, which is going to be this midlock position. They know that Newcastle have the majority of the ball, and they'll watch the Fulham game, and they'll know that if Newcastle are flat, if Newcastle are not intense, if Newcastle are not up for it, or they're feeling a bit yellow-bellied because they're not playing at St. James's Park where the fans are cheering their name, they could have a lot of joy here. So they're going to take up this position. You can see now, Newcastle obviously in the black, they're going from right to left. Lewis Hall has the ball. How do Newcastle counteract that? We talked about this a couple of days ago, how Newcastle did really, really well against Man City. And in fact, the penalty situation came from Newcastle on more than one occasion playing through the middle. Now, if Newcastle can play through the middle of a Man City team, Newcastle can play through the middle of a Everton team. And how do they do this? So in this case, you guys can see here, and I think Joe Linton's role is going to be very key. You see here, obviously, I think Lewis Hall will play, and when Newcastle have the ball, the majority of the times it will either be with Shaw here, or Dan Burn will try and get it to Lewis Hall as soon as possible. Now, Lewis Hall will have a number of options to him, which Everton will try to block off. You see Bruno G here, you see Tonali, you see Joe Linton, you see Harvey Barnes. What Everton will try to do is Ashley Young will be trying to get in front of Barnes. Jasper or Jack Harrison will be trying to get in front of Bruno to block off the passing channels. The Corey will be here fighting with Joe Linton. That's going to be a brilliant battle. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin will be trying to block the passing avenues to Dan Burn. Mangala will be trying to get in front of Tonali. McNeil will be also waiting here in the centre to try and be effective. So if the ball does break, you've got a free man here. And that's how Everton are going to try and force the ball out. So Newcastle, they have to be quick. And one thing that, and they have to be intentional and they have to be intense about how they play. And what Newcastle did really, really, really well against Man City, the first chance and the second time what led to the goal. Lewis Hall, when he receives the ball, will have a number of options to him. Either Joe Linton makes himself available and makes the runs, gets the Corey out the way. Gordon can drop in, for instance. You see Lewis Hall, Bruno trying to make space, perhaps Jasper to follow him. Because if you do that man marking approach, you are susceptible to leaving space. So this is how Newcastle can create space. Bruno moving to the side, Joe Linton making space, Gordon dropping in, the ball coming into him, Joe Linton continuing the runs, things like that. Or as they did against Man City, because you want Gordon to be up against, because this is a situation you want. You want Gordon up against Tarkowski in a situation where it's a 1v1 and Tarkowski has to chase Gordon. We know the winner in that situation. Bruno has to be quick here to the ball. What happened against Man City, what led to the goal, is the ball came to Hall and literally first touch onto Bruno. If Jasper's not quick enough, Bruno will either pick it up, pass it over to Joe Linton, or as he did in the Man City game, Tonali at this point was on his feet. Mangala would have to also chase him. He can't just stay there. The ball goes over and Murphy's very clever. Murphy either makes the run upwards, where he forces Branthwaite to join him when creating that space in between, or Murphy drops in. The ball comes from Bruno to Tonali. Tonali is either very, very good at, and it depends on where Tarkowski is. If the ball is on for Gordon, if there is a gap here, Tonali will try to get that through ball onto Gordon where he's in a one-on-one, and Branthwaite has to really probably help Tarkowski out in the situation because he doesn't want a one-on-one situation with Gordon. The alternative is, and again, they're going to be following Gordon. Gordon will be making these type of runs. Tonali's on the ball. Murphy can follow in, or as in the case that led to the Murphy can join in here. We know that Trippier likes to drop in as well. Tonali can drop it off to Trippier. And there's, again, look how much space already, because Everton like to push up, there is the space there. And I think Murphy and Trippier are going to make a lot of space here in the back as well, where the ball can again get off to Trippier and create these type of situations where you can get the ball into the box. Others will be following here, Tonali and others will be running onto it. Or, as what led to the actual chance against Man City, Tonali gets the ball here, but Bruno doesn't stand to attention. He keeps on moving. Well, I think it was Joe Linton actually who got the ball. So Joe Linton drops in. Joe Linton drops in. Bruno's in the center, but Tonali, whose movement is very, very good, he also joins in with Murphy and with Trippier. Now Mangala can either join him. If Mangala does join him, he leaves this big space in the middle. Murphy has to stay. Not Murphy. Branthwaite has to stay where he is, as we engaged in Man City. Where now Joe Linton has the ball, just past to either get the ball or Joe Linton continues to run on, gets the ball to Bruno, and Bruno has now a choice of who to pass it to. Because you've got Tonali here, Mangala has to worry about Tonali, Trippier here, Vitali has to worry about Trippier, Murphy somewhere behind Branthwaite. So Branthwaite can't necessarily think about helping Tarkowski now, because now the situation is if he leaves Murphy and Tonali, it could create a situation where you've got Murphy running onto the ball, or he stays where he's at, and now you leave the situation that what Everton are trying to prevent is Gordon against Tarkowski in a foot race. Branthwaite stays because there's Murphy, there's an overload now of Tonali, Murphy, and Trippier, and now you leave a situation where Bruno can push up and get the ball onto Gordon and to Tarkowski, and you're left in that situation where now you have Gordon winning that foot race. So that's part of there is a blessing and a curse to doing man marking and pressing the way Everton are doing. Yes, you can win the ball. Yes, you can counter press. Yes, you can do all those things. But you're also susceptible to leaving space in behind or in different parts of the pitch. But Newcastle have to make the movements. They have to be intense in their play. They can't just stand there. And their passing has to be good. 1-2 touch passes. And they have to be ready. They have to take risks. Players have to make movements. If Murphy doesn't move, if Trippier doesn't move, if Tonali doesn't move, if Joe Linton doesn't move, they are going to be in trouble. And Everton will destroy us. It'll be the situation when we played against Fulham all over again. So that's how Newcastle can overcome the mid-block. Going forward in terms of this situation where Newcastle are doing well, they have superiority, and I think this was again very similar again to the Man City situation where Newcastle were beginning to create these type of situations where where essentially Newcastle, because they've been winning ground duels, they've been competing, they've been fighting, they've been either playing really good passing football through the middle, direct football. They earned the right now where Man City had to respect them and drop back. And that's how you win your right against Everton. Dan Burn-Shaw on the ball. Now Lewis Hall has the flexibility of either joining in. So Dominic Calvert-Lewin and others have to follow, joining in here and being in a passing option to Joe Linton, maybe over it to Harvey Barnes, or really pressing up. And now you've got situations where, because you've got that overload, you can get it over to Shaw, who can either pass it to Bruno. Now you start creating situations where, if Everton are not quick, you start creating situations where Trippier has the ball. You've got these overlaps. You start creating triangles through the middle. Bruno receiving the ball. We know how good he was, especially on the half turn. We want to see Bruno receiving the ball in these situations. In the situations where he can get the ball over to half turn. Because Gordon is going to be such a threat with his pace, I think Branthwaite is really going to follow him. Gordon can be really clever. In these situations, if Bruno should receive the ball, he can either drop in, Branthwaite follow him, and you see the likes of Tonali running through, Murphy running through, Mangala and Vitali will have to drop back. He can either pass it on to Trippier, and he can obviously run down the touchline. Or if Mangala is not quick enough, you can do the through balls to Tonali. You can do the through balls to Murphy. All because Gordon created that space from behind him because of the threat that he has of his pace. But again, Newcastle have to be intense in their movement and in terms of what they're doing, connecting the defense with the midfield and with the attack. I think Newcastle can do that, and they can do that really, really, really well. Again, going back to the situation where we saw, for instance, how, and this is the last kind of example I want to show, where we saw how Ashley Young, another key player, alongside McNeil, against Palace. So Ashley Young is really, really good crosser of the ball, has a good technique. Obviously, he's a veteran. Joe Linton is going to have to do this hybrid role again, where he's doing a lot of box-to-box situations, and he's going to have to be there to try and either make himself available for the pass alongside Lewis Hall. So now Lewis Hall can keep Ashley Young occupied. Harvey Barnes can keep the Corey and others occupied. Tonali or Bruno can drop it. Probably be Bruno in this case, will be dropping in and creating these type of situations where you'll see Trippier here on the side. You see Murphy here. So Everton are pressing. The ball goes over to Joe Linton. He got either Lewis Hall available to him, Barnes available to him, Bruno available to him. But then you got that connection from the midfield, from the defense to the midfield and to the attack as well. But again, it comes down to movement and not being static, not allowing Everton to settle. Ashley Young is going to be trying to cut this ball off to Lewis Hall. Ashley Young or Harvey Barnes, whoever tries to drop in and try and catch Newcastle unawares. So it's going to be the job of Bruno, who'll probably be marked by DCL or Mangala, to try and block those channels. Joe Linton's going to have to be dropping in. Lewis Hall have to be ready to try and get the ball. Tonali having to support. I think Murphy's job is going to be so important, and Gordon's job in kind of ensuring that his movement is going to ensure that Tarkowski or Branthwaite can't really press as high as they want to. His movement is going to try and create these gaps in the middle where you want Murphy to get in on it and Trippier and others. But so this part of the field is going to be so key, so important about how Newcastle move the ball. So it's going to be a really, really interesting game from a tactical point of view to see and to analyze. And the point was made earlier: if the Newcastle that played Man City turns up, Newcastle win the game. If the Newcastle that played Fulham turns up, we lose the game 3-1. If the Newcastle that played Wolves turned up, it's probably likely to be a draw or a 50-50 on the win. But the Newcastle that plays against Man City can break through that Everton line, and we kind of showed it here. And Eddie Howe will be trying to the movement I showed you guys is the same is the same movement that Newcastle did against Man City. And in order to replicate that movement, it's going to have to, as we saw there, there's going to be players having to be available for the ball, having to be aggressive, just as or even more aggressive than Everton to want the ball and to make themselves available. Gordon's movement up front is going to create a lot of space, is there to create space for the players in midfield, for the likes of Tonali to drop in, the likes of Bruno to drop in, and Murphy and Trippier. And I think that's where the key battles are going to be, because they're going to be so much focus on your Joe Lintons and Brunos and Tonali's, for instance. How Trippier keeps his width, keeps Vitali off him. Murphy and Gordon, and what they do, trying to create this gap in midfield. Tarkowski will be so scared in terms of what Gordon can do. Barnes will be trying to keep Decore or Young honest, trying to keep them off in terms of being available there, is trying to create these gaps, trying to create these movements through space. And Tonali, who's very clever with his movement as well, Mangala and others will be trying to follow him, trying to get the ball as well. But Newcastle can do it. And I think maybe I'm talking my way into it, but it's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Obviously, Everton won their last game against Palace. It's the first game, and even Sean Dyche said, where Everton played offensively really well and defensively really, really well. And that's because it's in this season, they're adapting that counter-pressing and pressing style of their game. And so, yes, they're scoring goals, but they're shifting a lot of goals as well at the back. And so they're still learning that process. So yes, it's a Goodison Park. Yes, it's going to be intense. But if Newcastle turn up with their intensity, their overall quality would also tell. Because in one-on-one battles between Kieran Trippier and Vitali, I think Trippier wins. I think Murphy wins with Vitali. I think Murphy, in one-on-one battles, especially running battles between Gordon, Branthwaite, Gordon, Tarkowski, he wins. Harvey Barnes he's like 10 years younger than Ashley Young. I know Ashley Young is good. We can win those battles. Burn against Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Tonali against Mangala, Joe Linton and Decore will be a physical battle, be a real battle for the ages. But individual quality, individual ability, I back Newcastle to be able to win those battles. But you have to fight. You have to be winning your ground duels, your aerial duels, your tackling, your recoveries. And then that's when you earn the right, your technical players. And this is what happened against Man City. If you look at the Man City results, the players that had the most touches on the ball, Kieran Trippier, Bruno Gomes, Joe Linton, Fabian Schär, our most technical players, were able to get onto the ball and were able to push Newcastle forward. And we're able to get into these situations. If Everton aren't good in their press, aren't able to hold off Newcastle, and Newcastle are able to really press up against Everton in these areas where our technical players get onto the ball, we'll be able to hurt them. So that's my view. That's my review that's my kind of tactical breakdown. Everton are very, very good, have been very, very good in direct balls over the top. They got the highest stats for long, accurate balls. They've been very good in the counter press and in the press, especially the mid blocks, hitting teams. But they've been very, very good at keeping teams penned in their own half. Sometimes there's 8 Everton players in opposition halves, for instance, 4 or 5 Everton players in opposition half boxes. They've actually had more touches in opposition boxes than Newcastle have had. So they've been very successful in their press. They're the 7th highest pressing team in the league, again higher than Newcastle United. So you can expect that. But what that leaves is gaps in the back. And if Newcastle can turn up in terms of their ability on the ball, their better players, their intensiveness, there is space to exploit for them to win. And so, that's the key strengths for Everton. At the end of the day, they conceded the 15 goals for a reason. And a lot of those reasons either have been set pieces, being caught on the attack, especially on the wings. When Ashley Young, Vitali push forward, they leave a lot of space in behind. And when you've got Branthwaite as the only defender with real genuine pace, recovery pace, it leaves Tarkowski and others really exposed. And yes, they've got big midfielders, but they're not necessarily quick midfielders as well. So Newcastle have an opportunity here to really exploit Everton, but their passing game, their intensity has to be there. So that's my conclusion. I'm going to give my prediction in a moment. I'm going to read the comments first, and I'm going to give my conclusion on Everton. Jonathan Shaw. Hello, Jonathan. Hope you're well, sir. All right, Phillips. Agree with the team, but maybe I'll put Tino over Trips mainly for his speed advantage. Do you know what, Jonathan? I was thinking the same thing. I was really thinking the same thing. What Howe is looking for, I think, is when Trippier is on the ball, his creativity and his ability to create chances far exceeds Tino Livramento, as well as his leadership. So at the moment, that's why he's favoured. But I agree with you, especially when Livramento inverts and supports our midfield, that could be a way. But I wouldn't be surprised to see if he plays. But that's a good call there. Jonathan Shaw, again, I think something clicked after City draw, and that level of performance will be the aim from now on. Yeah, exactly. And I'm fully hoping and fully expecting for the team that played against Man City to turn up against Everton, Goodison Park. Silencing the crowd, Jonathan Shaw. Silencing the crowd will be the key. If we can frustrate the crowd, then that's half the battle won. As long as we turn up, we should have the quality to win. I full-heartedly agree with you, Jonathan. I full-heartedly agree with you on that one. And so comes to predictions, guys. Send me your predictions before we lock off here. I've outlined the tactical breakdown, my tactical breakdown for the game. As I've said, Everton have been very good in the press, very good in the counter press, very good with their mid blocks. They've been scoring goals from set pieces. They've been conceding goals from set pieces as well. And they've not been afraid to overload the opposition halves. They've not been afraid to press high. They've been really good at that. McNeil has been finding space in the half space between the midfield and the defense, and he's been very dangerous with his passing and his shooting. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been scoring as well. So those one-on-one battles with those guys are very, very key. However, and I agree with Jonathan Shaw, Newcastle's overall player quality exceeds Everton in many key areas, even defensively. Even though, Bird and Shaw, I fancy Bird in aerial battles against Calvert-Lewin. I fancy Bruno in battles against McNeil and battles against Jasper, whoever's pressing him there. And same with Tonali. I fancy Trippier and Murphy against Vitaly Malenko and Branthwaite. I fancy Gordon against Tarkowski, even Branthwaite in races, and John Barnes against Ashley Young. Newcastle bring the intensity. As Jonathan Shaw said, something clicked in that Man City game. That Newcastle turns up. I believe it can be a victory for Newcastle. I believe that Newcastle can win this game. I think we can. If we get a clean sheet, it'll be really good. But I think we'll win the game 2-1. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna give Gordon. I believe Gordon will score, and I think Tonali will score his second goal for the Toon. So Gordon and Tonali to score for the Toon. So I've asked you guys to send me, that's my predictions. That's my conclusion. That's my predictions. I've asked you guys to send me your prediction. I got one so far from Jonathan Shaw. 3-1 to the Toon. That's big. That's confidence. Respect to you, Jonathan, for that. And I back that as well. But I've given a 2-1 prediction. So guys, that's the show. We've talked about all the news surrounding Newcastle, the stadium, to build a new stadium or not to build a new stadium, essentially. Transfer news, goalkeepers, Lucas Chevalier, defenders, Joshua Acheampong, and somebody else came up as well. Link to Newcastle. House press conference where even the journalists are talking about, how are Newcastle going to perform outside or away? Can they replicate that form? That's going to be key to winning this game. If the Newcastle that played against Man City turns up, we can win this game, and how acknowledge that as well. We gave a tactical breakdown. Everton being really good in the press, really good in the high press, the counter press, their mid blocks, their set pieces, being willing to run into opposition halves and being clinical from McNeil and Calvert-Lewin. My belief is that if Newcastle will turn up with their intensity, their ground duels, their tackling, their recoveries will be good on the pass, with Lewis Hall getting on the ball, Trippier getting on the ball, Bruno Gomes getting on the ball, Joe Linton getting on the ball, all these guys, Shaw getting on the ball, being effective with it. That starts happening, Everton are in real trouble. And so I've backed Newcastle to win this game 2-1. Jonathan Shaw has backed Newcastle to win 3-1. And big up to him for that. Guys, you've been incredible. This has been an hour and a half show. And I know some of you guys have stayed from the beginning to the end. I appreciate you for that. Jonathan Shaw, again, loving the detail you put into your shows. I really, really appreciate that. I hope you guys enjoy the shows. It's your Friday evening, so I hope you guys really enjoy the show. But guys, let me know what you think. Send in your views, your conclusions on all the things that we've talked about. Send in your predictions. And as always, remember to like, share, and subscribe. I hope you have a great evening, whether you're by yourself or with your family, staying in or going out. Be well, stay safe. And as always, guys, in all things that you do, good night or good evening, and God bless, folks.
Brilliant from Sham. And now Murphy could take on the shot. Fabian Schär.